भद्रं कर्णेभिः शृणुयाम देवाः भद्रं पश्येमाक्षभिर्यजत्राः स्थिरैरङ्गैस्तुष्टुवागुंसस्तनूभिः व्यशेम देवहितं यदायुः स्वस्ति न इन्द्रो वृद्धश्रवाः स्वस्ति न पूषा विश्ववेदाः स्वस्ति नस्तार्क्ष्यो अरिष्टनेमिः स्वस्ति नो बृहस्पतिर्दधातु ओम शांति शांति शांति. Namaste. We are here in this session of the webinar to examine an extraordinary question. Shaunaka, the student of Mundaka Upanishad, approaches Angirasa and asks the teacher this question: what is that knowing which everything becomes known? Kasminnu bhagavo vijnate sarvamidam vijnatam bhavati iti. What an astonishing question. It is such an unusual way of making a query. What is it knowing which everything becomes known? One wonders how Shaunaka had an inkling of this kind of doubt. While introducing the student, the Upanishad calls him Mahashalaha. Shaunako havai Mahashalaha. It says, and about him says, Angirasam Vidivad Upasannaha Papracha. He approached the teacher Angirasa with proper formalities and asked. The significance of the word Mahashalaha is that he had, literally speaking, he had conducted lot of yajnas and yagas, because organizing a yajna requires a yajnashala, yagashala, and so on. So Mahashalaha is somebody who had organized all those mighty, massive rituals of the Karma Kanda, and quite presumably Shaunaka had engaged in many upasanas. Karma and upasanas thus were home ground for Shaunaka. Therefore, we don't have an ordinary student here who is a beginner or who is a novice or who is not clear about the terminologies and so on. As regards the Karma Kanda, the ritual portion, as well as Upasana Kanda, this Shaunaka was very well versed. However, thanks to performing all those karmas, thanks to performing Nitya Karma, Naimittika Karma, avoiding Kamya Karma, avoiding Nishiddha Karma very carefully, Shaunaka had undergone a lot of inner development. Very nicely, learned teachers say this karma versus jnana is a very intriguing question. We can neither underestimate karma, saying, oh, we don't need karma at all, let us go straight to Vedanta. That would be one error for most of us, and we cannot overestimate karma. Saying karma is glorious, never leave karma, go on doing it and get more and more into it and so on. Therefore, to put karma, when I say karma, karma and upasana, put both of them in their proper place is highly required. In this Kali Yuga, lot of Vedantins just don't do any karma, any upasana, and they just learn Vedanta. Then it doesn't deliver the goods. They haven't received the inner enrichment, which is, though I called it enrichment, actually in its true nature, it is a tremendous amount of letting go. Not seeking to become somebody, not, of course, being after mere pleasure, not going after name and fame, not pursuing some idle curiosity, not just imitating A or B. Today, because of comparison and competition, alas, a large number of bright people in today's world go on pursuing something or the other. Why do they do it? Because somebody else has done it. From childhood onwards, they are initially guided by parents, and later on it has got into them. Even from a young age, they want to do what somebody else did. Therefore, a big job with a lot of salary, or going abroad, or being part of a multinational company, having some visiting card showing some special position, designation, etc., and to talk about how they visited this country or that city, how they bought this and purchased that, how they sold that and got this. This Vyavahara, this Laukika Vyavahara, with all its glitter and glamour, endlessly keeps even very academically proficient and brilliant people in their clutches. If they do the Vaidika karma, Nitya Naimittika karma, then they will be able to see through the falsehood of mere pursuit of worldly position and pleasure. That is when they will have Vairagya. So, Shaunaka, without going long on it now, you must understand Shaunaka had done karma very assiduously with proper faith, and slowly he had moved, he had graduated from Sakama karma to Nishkama karma. That is how, and when he came to Angirasa, he was, we have all the reason to believe, he was full of Vairagya. All right, but what made him ask this question? What is it knowing which everything becomes known? We should imagine that even as he was very active in karma and upasana, here and there he had learned or he had heard about some extraordinary wisdom. He had heard about moksha being possible through something out of the way. And therefore, without getting proper clarity on it from those sources who just talked about it but who are not able to provide to him proper information, he approached Angirasa. Therefore, the qualification, not the academic or not the kind that is talked about in the world, but inner qualification, something that the person himself can understand by introspection. A person himself can recognize how he had been attached to power, position, pleasure, etc. before. The urges were uncontrollable before, and how now he is able to keep his mind calm, how he is now, in fact, seeking something lasting, how he is now in search of something very profound, not just the glitter and the glamour. That the person himself knows, God knows, and maybe a couple of people close to him, if they too are very competent, If they too are very spiritually qualified, would know. Otherwise, people close to him also would think of him as gone case. This person has lost interest in life and so on. Therefore, Shaunaka had already equipped himself with lot of viveka and vairagya. Okay, what is this question? Kasminnu bhagavo vidnate sarvamidam vidnatam bhavati. In fact, in the commentary by Shankara, the Bhashya raises a question. How can Shaunaka directly ask, what is it knowing which everything is known? First, he should ask, is there something knowing which everything can be known? And only upon getting the answer, yes, there is, he should ask, now tell me what it is. So, how can he go directly to what is it knowing which everything is known? And with Bhashyakara playing the role of the Siddhanti answers that no, it's not that he already knew, but to reduce words, to reduce time, he straight away asks this question. He is open to be told that there is no such thing, don't waste your time on it. So Angirasa can say that too. He is open to it. So he comes straight to the question, what is it knowing which everything becomes known? At this point, it is worthwhile to regard or to consider the great significance of this question. As we already called it an extraordinary question, we must explain what makes it so extraordinary. This question, knowing something, we come to know everything, has to be first understood as not literally knowing all the subjects under the sun. To literally know all the subjects is utterly unnecessary. Why should everybody or why should anybody among us know anything and everything? It is spiritually speaking totally useless. In spirituality, that is in what we call the science of liberation, in order to be free from sorrow, in order to be free from any kind of discontent, any kind of unrest, in order that we are free from any regrets or fear and so on, that's what we call moksha. In order that we are free of negative energy in us, it's not necessary to know uh, all the capitals of all the countries, what rivers flow in France or in Nigeria, uh, and that encyclopedic or super encyclopedic knowledge. Why should anybody have? Therefore, it doesn't literally mean coming to know everything. Though we talk of siddhis and we believe that enlightened people have access to any knowledge. If they wish, they can tap it. But they are not interested in that. Then, what is the implication of knowing everything? We want to clearly state that in the egoistic living, there is always a certain insecurity. You find somebody knowing something and you don't know, then you feel, oh my, I am lagging behind. Somebody has gained this knowledge. Someone has gone and enjoyed that experience. Someone has visited that place. Someone has got this degree from a famous university. Something or the other. I don't have it. Alas, I am perhaps no good unless I too get that object or qualification or experience. So, this incompleteness that we experience is to be eliminated. Therefore, what is it knowing which one knows everything simply means coming upon a state of consciousness where one does not actually feel incomplete at all. In a book of jokes I had read, I don't know whether this really had happened, someone had gone to J. Krishnamurti and asked him, what do you think of Osho? And J. Krishnamurti just said, I don't think of Osho. The matter is over. Why should J. Krishnamurti think of everybody else who is also regarded a spiritual teacher? Or I don't think of Osho. This has great depth, great beauty. For freedom is not by gathering and accumulating knowledge. It is by knowing we are fine, not just saying on the uh, outside, but it is an extraordinary insight. And in the Vedantic terminology, we say it is letting go of identification with the personality. So, in this context, we have Rishi Angirasa answering very slowly and patiently, rather than straight away going to what is that highest wisdom by which one is as happy as knowing everything. Literally, one doesn't have to know, but in as much as one doesn't feel incomplete, one is not pricked, one is not pinched by not knowing something, one is totally at peace, and therefore one doesn't suffer from jealousy or a sense of lagging behind, a sense of being left out, and such things. If one doesn't have all these bugs, one is free. So rather than saying this is that wisdom, slowly Rishi Angirasa says, well, all knowledge in this world is in two camps, the lower knowledge and the higher knowledge. Aparavidya and Paravidya. Dve vidye veditavye, says Rishi Angirasa, itihasma yad brahmavido vadanti, paracha eva aparacha. Apara means lower, para means higher. Shankara in his commentary gives a nice short explanation for aparavidya. The sentence goes, aparacha dharma adharma sadhana tat phala vishaya. Aparavidya, lower knowledge, is something that has as its vishaya, that has as its subject. Number one, dharma and adharma as the sadhanas. By doing dharma, you get such and such things. By doing adharma, you will get such and such things. So dharma is the sadhana, adharma is the sadhana, and something is to be got, that is phala. Dharma dharma sadhana tat phala vishaya. Now that statement by Bhashyakara is very significant. If you and I look at our own life, we are all the time looking for some means which then brings to us some end. The means is called sadhana, the end is called sadhya. Elsewhere, Shankara uses the expression sadhya sadhana vishaya. So there is a vast domain of knowledge, numerous subjects that all universities offer, and elsewhere also you get all kinds of skills, all kinds of feathers you put on your cap. But at the end of it all, they are some means to some particular ends. All that summarily is finite only. Rishi Angirasa, after saying there is higher wisdom and lower wisdom, astonishingly says in the fifth mantra, Rigveda, Yajurveda, Samaveda, Atharvaveda, then Shiksha, Kalpa, Vyakarana, Nirukta, Chanda, Jyotisha, all of them are Aparavidya. Obviously, a question arises. If you call all the Vedas also Aparavidya, then Upanishads are also Aparavidya because Upanishads are part of Vedas. So we are in deep trouble. Though it is clarified, I would like to read the beautiful sentence by Shankara himself. He says, don't forget the context Shaunaka is asking for that knowledge which sets us free. And Shaunaka comes from the background of karma and upasana. Before Shaunaka, if the word Veda is used, whether it is Rigveda or Yajurveda, Samaveda or Atharva Veda, moment the word Veda is used, instantly he thinks of the millions of things that are said in the Vedas where something is to be done and something is to be got. There are sadhanas, then there are sadhyas. That is the picture he has of the Vedas. So, keeping the student in mind, how the student looks at the Vedas, the teacher feels free to say, all those Vedas, the way you look at them, are aparavidya. Otherwise, the Upanishads not looked at as something to be chanted, something to be recited, something to be repeated for japa, because portions of Upanishads can be used for japa also. And what is more, in the Upanishads also some upasanas are mentioned. Upanishads are not 100% that jnana only. But jnana is the main part of Upanishads. But those who are attached to karma and upasana just go around it. They would not take that jnana portion seriously. They would be taking all other portions as the main teaching. So, keeping Shaunaka in mind, the teacher says that is all aparavidya. Because one way we say it is about karma and upasana, and that is also meant by another expression, Shabda Rashi. Because Shabda Rashi, heap of words, not just words themselves, they have the ability to prompt action. Do this. Whereas jnana is not about doing, jnana is about seeing rightly. Samyak darshana. Whereas karma and upasana are about doing. So if you study Jaimini Sutras, not Brahma Sutras, which is Jnana Kanda, Jaimini Sutras in the Karma portion, the famous sutra, most quoted sutra over there is Amnayasya Kriyartatvat. Amnaya means any Veda mantra. Any Amnaya, any Veda mantra is meant only to indicate a certain action. Otherwise, it would be a waste. And since Vedas can never be a waste, not a single word of Vedas can be a waste, the Jaimini Sutra implies that there is no mantra in the Vedas, including Upanishads, where there is nothing asked of us to do. Now, that discipline is different. When we come to the Vedanta, Vedanta says that was not the complete truth. In the Vedas, we do have portions which are not Kriyartha. Artha means for the purpose of, Kriya means of doing. Amnayasya Kriyartatvat doesn't apply to a number of mantras in the Vedas. For example, in this very first khanda of the first Mundaka, where this extraordinary question has come, there itself there is a mantra Yattadadreshyamagrahyam avarnam achakshushrottram and so on, pointing to that aksharam, that imperishable truth, insight of which is paravidya. Now that Yattadadreshyamagrahyam the sixth mantra, is not kriyartha. It is not for indicating a line of action. It is for us to understand and the job is over. So, while the student presently has the picture that all the Vedas are for doing something, either with hands and legs, with samagri, or without moving the body, mentally you visualize, mentally you concentrate, mentally bring an image, bring a picture, bring some kind of even sound, and just be with it, concentrate. Therefore, in exalted discussions of the spiritual wisdom, it is said, one should not even go for concentration. Concentration, which might be a great tool on lower levels to achieve things in the world, on the higher level of liberation, concentration is an artificiality. Rather than seeing things as they are, you hold on to a picture, you hold on to an image, you hold on to something you have chosen to, you know, do upasana of. Therefore, on higher levels, one lets go of concentration, one remains an unbiased observer, sakshi, one only watches. All right, to a few more words, this question becomes extraordinary by virtue of the significance of the answer that is possible. What is the extraordinary dimension of this question? It is this question which can take us not from one place to another, but beyond space itself. It is this question which can take us not from one point of time to another point of time. You talk about space travel, then there is something called time travel. At least in science fiction, there is something called time machine. You sit in it, and apparently you can go from 2020, you can go to 2050 because of some special mechanism. Or you can travel backwards in time. You go to 2010 or maybe 2001, September 11, 9/11, and go very near Manhattan and maybe at some safe distance, traveling there through the time machine, you witness the twin towers coming down because of terrorist attack with those planes. So going from 2020 to 2001 or 2020 to 2050, this is for travel in time. And earlier I talked of travel in space. But this question shakes us up from our long standing habit of moving from time 1 to time 2, space 1 to space 2, or cause to effect, etc. Rather, it has the potential to shake us and lift us to that where there is no time, no space, no causation. This is not about becoming, this is about being. Accordingly, Angirasa, the teacher, says, Paravidya is about akshara. Ata para yaya tadaksharam adigamyate. That is the mantra which goes, namely, the fifth mantra. Fifth mantra, last part says, if you want to know what is Paravidya, which is the answer to your question, knowing which, what is it knowing which everything becomes known, right? Angirasa says, that is that wisdom by which the imperishable is known. And then he gives what is imperishable, that which cannot be seen, that which cannot be held, that which cannot be grasped, that which doesn't die, that which is timeless. Number of pointers. We would not even call it adjective, strictly speaking. It's a pointer. All right. A couple of comments before we conclude. Here, the beauty and the great depth of the matter is brought out by Bhagavan Bhashyakara, Adi Shankara, in very scintillating manner. While introducing this mantra, Yatta Dadreshyamagrahyam Agotram Avarnam, that is the sixth mantra, Adi Shankara writes, there is something very special about this Paravidya. There is something which is so distinct, a cut above everything else. So we ask, what is that so special? This would be another subject, another branch of knowledge. We'll master it. Maybe it's a little harder. No, no, no. This is not just another, but this is in an entirely different camp. And towards that, he says, this is something which just eliminates your error. You have error, and you, the seeker, is part of the error. Brahma that you really are doesn't seek. The ego is seeking, and you are not the ego, right? So, this error, avidya, includes the seeker. The seeker is part of avidya. The seeker, though in ordinary language we say the seeker presently has avidya, as though I have an umbrella with me, then I hand it over to somebody, I am now free from an umbrella. I hold a pen and then I give the pen away to somebody. In that case, the pen is different from me. But in the case of avidya, this avidya and me, that me meaning the incomplete being, the me, the seeker, the me, the student, the me who is searching, this me and avidya are on par. They are co-equal. They together rise and they together subside. So, keeping this in mind, these things Adi Shankara clarifies at many other places. But here, there is a very profound statement. Avidyayaha apayaha eva parapraptihi. Avidya has to go. Apaya here means going away. In some languages, I guess in Sanskrit also, apaya can mean danger. But here, apaya means apa plus aya. Aya is gamana, apagamanam. Avidyayaha apagamanam eva parapraptihi. There is nothing else that needs to be done. Now the question is, how does avidya then go? Avidyayaha apagamanam apayaha katham bhavati. It is only by vidya, by seeing, not by doing, not by visualizing, not by concentrating, not by rolling up our sleeves, not by speeding up, not by better finance management or time management or emotion management. All these popular topics, all of them will have to be left behind. Can you see properly? If you have no ability to see, then do all those things, emotion management, calm down. But once you have the capacity to see, let go of your old habit of fixing things, of doing something, tinkering with something. Don't do anything. See properly. Avidyayaha apayaha eva parapraptihi na arthantaram. And then last quotation from the Bhashya, because it is in the Bhashya that the question and the answer come out with tremendous significance. In the Bhashya, there is a long sentence where Shankara says something which is highly thought provoking. He says, Yatha vidhi vishaye, in the matter of karma and upasana, they are called vidhi, because vidhi means something instructed, you got to do it. Vihita, what is prescribed. Vihita, that is adjective, vidhi is noun. Yatha vidhi vishaye kartradi aneka karaka upasamhara dwarena. There is a doer, there is something that he takes and puts into, let us say, fire, like in a sacrifice, and there is fire. So somebody who offers fire, into which he offers a ladle, like kind of spoon, in which he takes the ghee or some samagri and puts it. This is all called different elements of an activity. And when somebody studies about a particular ritual, right away, he doesn't get the benefits of the ritual. Vakyartha jnana kalad anyatra. One understands, oh, this is what is to be done. And it has to be done on such and such day. It has to be done during morning hours. Something may have to be done by evening hours, whatever. So place, time, what are the material, he understands. Then he actually does. Then after doing also, at some point of time later, the benefit of that karma or upasana comes to this performer. Now, in sharp contrast, Shankaracharya writes, it is not so here in the case of Paravidya. The question that we are considering in this session is simply extraordinary because it elicits this kind of answer, this kind of commentary by Bhagavan Bhashyakara. Bhashyakara writes, this is a matter if you are ready with Viveka Vairagya, and if the competent teacher has said the right thing at the right time, has revealed it through his skills, then Vakyartha Samakale eva, simple Sanskrit. Vakyartha, earlier it was said, Vakyartha Jnana Kalat Anyatra. You understand the meaning of sentence at one point of time, and another point of time, after performing the ritual, etc., you get the benefit. Whereas in the case of this Samyak Darshana, Vakyartha Jnana Samakale Evatu Paryavasito Bhavati. Artha Paryavasito Bhavati. Artha means what we are seeking. We are seeking liberation. If you understand what is said, then the matter is over. This is mind blowing. He further confirms it. Kevala Shabda Prakashita Artha Jnana Matra Nishta Vyatirikta Abhavat. The Sanskrit compounds are a bit long, but you work backwards, it is simple. Abhavat. There is nothing else than staying very firmly in right seeing. But where do we get that right seeing? It's in the sentence. It is in that statement. Satyam Jnanamanantam Brahma. That's a statement. And if one understands it rightly, job is over. Stay there, stay in that understanding. Kevala Shabda Prakashita Artha Jnanamatra Nishta Vyatirikta Abhavat. There is nothing other than staying in clear understanding. Therefore, without any further comments, let me tell you this question, Kasminnu Bhagavo Vidnate Sarvamidam Bhavati, Vidnatam Bhavati, and Atapara Yayata Daksharamadigamyate, Yattadadreshyamagrahyam, etc. This question and the answer together are a source of the highest Vedanta wisdom. Everything else is just to make possible a proper understanding of it. If you understand right here, nothing else is required. So we call this, for that reason, the most extraordinary question. Om Namah Shivaya. Please feel free to ask a question or two. Let's see, we have, yes. I'm just examining whether somebody, yes, somebody has raised a hand. Yes, perhaps the youngest participant today, perhaps Parth Garg. I'm going to enable Parth's microphone. Oh, ah, ah. Oh, I went a little up or down. Where is Parth? Meanwhile, Parth decided to ask in text form. Oh, he's saying I am muted. So did you mute yourself or has some organizer muted?
Self-muted.
Blue. Self-muted. Parth, do something. You click on that. I think you have a way to unmute yourself. It says,
Hello.
no, it's, yeah, please, Sas, go ahead.
Thanks a lot, sir, for having this session.
on this event of Guru Purnima, and I'm really thankful to you for having this session. Uh, During this course of session, you were mentioning of multiple things, uh, Jnana Yoga and Karma Yoga, and in the last you concluded saying, with this understanding of the actual truth, the one
Mm.
question, which will let you know everything, you stay in that understanding.
Yeah.
Now, I have a couple of points and questions.
Mm.
One is lately, I myself have been practicing, or I can use the word practice for the lack of words. Uh,
Mm.
so to be able to see who you actually are by negating, by neti, by looking at all your actions, which is not you, the body, and the rest of it.
Mm.
And what really happens is most of the times, you are doing a 100-meter race, and by this
Mm.
observation you become calm and it becomes a marathon. You're doing it, everything with this observation.
Mm.
But in our day-to-day life, it so happens also this, the
Mm.
span of attention reduces, and we again start doing this sprint, 100-meter sprint.
Ah.
Now, as part of an explanation, someone might say, okay, these are all tendencies, the causal body, the suksha shariras, and the rest of it. But all of us, are in the midway where we try to, be selfless, but are caught up in the day-to-day activities. Now, what is the outlook that one should have in the, middle of this path? Since all these activities, if I'm watching and saying I am, not the doer, I'm not the one who is facing these difficulties, or I'm not the doer, whatever, like, I'm not
Mm.
the so-called person path. But at the same
Mm.
time, there are these hardships, there are same times, I'm this effort going into play, there is so much of passion. Now, how to see this? What to how to see this in a proper context? Both these two things going in parallel.
Correct. Yeah. So, really speaking, one should be very, very honest. If one finds that one has anger, one has desire, one has some low self esteem, one feels let down somewhere, and somewhere else one feels very good, somebody praises and you feel so good. Then the ground reality is one's ego is quite strong. So one must get into karma and upasana. Primarily, go into sat karma. Do as many good things as possible. That is, some service, sharing, and so on. Then you get to Vairagya slowly. All this is okay to hear Vedanta, but the ground reality is in a 24-hour span or for 48, 72-hour span of time, you actually realize that various kama, krodha, etc. are very strong in the person. Therefore, Bhagavad Gita makes it very clear. Chapter 6 says, Aru Rukshor Muner Yogam Karma Karana Muchyate. Karma means Karma Yoga. So in my talk, I did not touch upon Karma Yoga, though I said Shaunaka had done it as Karma Yoga. Otherwise, Karma with desire also is one kind. Karma without personal desire is Karma Yoga. Either way, you and I, when we realize we are not really able to stay firm in higher wisdom, we love it. We enjoy hearing it, but ground reality is different. We must engage ourselves in so many other sadhanas and build up. That is the factual thing.
Could you elaborate a little bit more on this karma yoga? Like maybe like five things. I just want to get some actionability out of it. Looks like little abstract to me still.
No, nothing abstract. Whenever you have a job, be good to your team members. Read up and follow some values. Don't frown at, suppose you are the head of a team, you have all chance to yell at your members, put pressure on them, twist their arm, etc. Don't do any of those. But gently, if somebody is not performing, Give him a little longer rope. Tell him that I'm giving you extra time, but if you can't do even within that extra time, then I may have to take some unpleasant step. Like that, they should then say that this is a wonderful boss, a good worker. So, at work, at home, in a lot of places, the values that Gita and other books provide to us can be lived. They are actually, to be practiced. So when you do that, it's all tangible. It's very, very. So read literature on emotional intelligence, empathy, self-awareness. What is it? There are exercises. So modern psychology gives, without bringing God, religion, etc. into picture. In Bhagavad Gita and in the Vedanta, we talk about values, and they are intertwined with some spiritual concepts. So if you see Gita chapter 13, Sri Krishna talks about being humble, being clean, being pure, being self-controlled. Then suddenly says devotion to God is a quality of a good person. So God comes into picture. Whereas if you take a Western book, self-help book, they won't talk about God. Stephen Covey or Marshall Goldsmith, they won't bring God because their books won't sell also in many circles. So they keep God away. So that's fine. So values are not abstract. Values become abstract then when you only know some key words and you have not thought about them, you have not studied them. Truthfulness, for example, if you discuss truthfulness with friends, if you study literature about truthfulness, it comes out threadbare. Then you will see how there is no truthfulness in the life of most people and how there are concrete exercises whereby one can move towards truthfulness.
Thanks, sir.
Okay.
Thank you. Thanks a lot.
Welcome, Parth. I'll go to Priya Natarajan. This enabling mic is always a little bit tricky. Self-muted. Priya, can you try to unmute your own microphone? Yes, you have done.
Yes,
No,
it's unmuted. How do we know God, Swamiji?
How do we know God? Yes. In these higher issues, it is only Shastras, saints, mystics, and little bit of faith is required. God cannot be known by mere logic. So study Sri Ramakrishna, study Sri Ramana Maharshi, and get better and better idea of in what sense they use the word God. So you study, and they may ask you to conduct some simple exercise. Sri Ramakrishna say, pray God with childlike faith, childlike, in all innocence. Now you may say, I find it hard, but Sri Ramakrishna would say, even then do a little, 10 minutes, sit down and so saints, mystics, realized souls, spiritual leaders, they not only give you concepts, but also give you some practical tips. Then you will slowly appreciate God.
Can we trust God, Swamiji?
Absolutely. If there is anyone who is 100% trustworthy, that is God. That's by definition. It is like asking, is fire hot always? Fire by definition is hot. There is nothing called cold fire. In the same way, there is nothing called untruthful God or untrustworthy God. God is completely trustworthy. But when sometimes we pray and nothing happens, there are other factors. God knows better.
Thank you.
Most welcome. Now let me see. Mrityunjay Kumar has a question. Self-muted, it says. Very interesting. see whether you can. Mrityunjay Kumar, can you find out how to turn your own microphone on? But now it says
Self-muted.
self-muted.
Yes, to click.
So where is their button? Participants, where do they have the button?
They have a control panel, same like us, but smaller one.
So Mrityunjay Kumar, go to your control panel and see there is a button to mute or unmute your mic. Click once, it will. Otherwise, you have to key in, type in the question. Top right corner, says Parth. Option to top right corner on your screen, top right corner. I think there may be some problem with his microphone. Meanwhile, let me see whether I can give a chance to somebody else. Savitaji has written a lot of text. Why don't we do this on Zoom, she says. Oh no, that is Parth's question. But other way, more and more people should know how to quickly key in the question. That is best. Okay, Savitaji wants to speak out also. Her mic self-muted, it says. Savitaji, go to top right corner, unmute your mic. Oh my God. Mic is a problem. Yeah. All right. I think this mic is a bit. Chris Chilukuri is here. I'll give the chance to Radha Krishna Chilukuri. Can you unmute your own mic?
I got it, Swamiji. Savita here. Can I?
Okay, you speak. After that, Radha Krishna. Yeah. Go ahead.
Okay, Swamiji, I just wanted to add ki in Ramayan, Ramji tells the whole public ki Nirmal Jan Sohi Mohi Pawa. So if you want to really know God, you have to come to your simplest form.
Yeah. Correct.
Thank you.
Childlike. Thank
Yes,
you. That is what Sri Ramakrishna.
To believe, to have faith.
Wonderful.
Complete.
Thank you for sharing that. Yeah.
Thank you, Swamiji. Hari Om.
Okay. Over to Krish now. Yeah, it's on now. Yeah.
Hari Om Swamiji, just again simple question on Sanskrit and something I don't understand. So why does the shloka, besides the meter and poetry part, if we leave all that aside, why does the shloka go like Vidyarambham Karishyami instead of Vidyarambham Karomi? If you leave the meter aside, being done by me as opposed to I am doing, what is the difference?
See, these future tense and the present tense are at times interchangeable. With all languages, we have that practice. You know. I used to always wonder in North India, somebody would say, "मैं एक प्रश्न पूछना चाहूँगा." I was to wonder, why don't you say मैं प्रश्न पूछना चाहता हूँ? So चाहता हूँ या चाहूँगा, you know, चाहूँगा technically is future tense. So Vidyarambham Karishyami, you yourself said it could be just to adjust the meter. Yeah, what is meant is karomi only.
Very well, Swamiji.
Yeah, they are sometimes interchangeable, not everywhere. Okay, that's good. That was a question on Sanskrit grammar. We will take, I guess, one more question and then wind up. Looks like Shamala Shetty. Self-muted. Is there a way you can? Oh, you have turned it on. Good. Please. Hari Om, Shamalaji.
Swamiji, if everything is governed by God, what is the role of free will?
Free will disappear. In that understanding, see, when we only read books and in a bookish way we say it's all God's will, we have not really understood it. It's like by somebody saying everything is Brahman, he doesn't become a Brahmadan. So it's like this. There is one state of consciousness where you 100% realize that everything is God's will. Then there is no free will. Like a leaf, a dry leaf that has got separated from a tree and floats in the wind, your life will be going and you are enjoying. You know, wherever God puts you, you are enjoying because you have no free will, nor do you have any complaint.
Yeah.
But when our knowledge is only bookish, whether students or a teacher like me is giving shloka after shloka and all Sanskrit, this and that, but actually suppose there is no complete surrender, then there is free will, and then dharma and adharma and right thing to do, wrong thing to do, all of them have a validity in that frame of reference. The frame of reference is not absolutely true, but at that moment it looks real.
Thank you, Swamiji.
Yeah. Okay. Probably that's about it. Yeah. Okay. Thank you all. Om Namo Narayana. See you again 2 Sundays later.
Hari Om Swamiji.
Hari Om.